Well, welcome back, everybody, to a new episode to the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marcy Nettles, and I am your host. And I am so excited to be here with you again. This podcast is all about sharing stories of breakdown to breakthrough opportunities that people find themselves in. These are circumstances where they can make a decision. They can decide to either stay where they're at and be stuck, or they can decide to do something different, to move forward and to be able to break through into their future. So I am super excited to be able to bring you guests that have had these experiences, that are talking from their hearts and sharing vulnerably with you. And my guest today is so special. And she absolutely is going to be sharing from her heart, her experiences. As we get into this conversation, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. So, Betsy Gall and her three children, Grady, Gavin, Sophie, and their dog Liberty, split their time between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she focuses on faith, family, and friends. Betsy is an active real estate agent, investor, landlord, and habitual remodeler. Betsy is speaking all over the country about physician suicide after her oncologist husband, Dr. Matthew Gall, tragically and unexpectedly took his own life on Thanksgiving Day in 2019. Betsy recently wrote a book titled The Illusion of the Perfect Profession. It is a story about love, physician suicide, and finding comfort and purpose in the aftermath. In her spare time, Betsy loves to downhill ski, spend time at her lake home, and exercise. She continues to give back to Angel Foundation and the Dr. Lorna Breen Foundation. Betsy, I am so grateful to have you here today with me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Marcy. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, you're so very welcome. Together, we decided that the title of your episode would be You're a Widow After Your Physician Husband Dies by Suicide. What now? I cannot even imagine. And just my heart is yours. And I am just fully present here for you right now for this conversation because I know it's going to impact so many people's lives as you share what you've gone through. But could you please start by sharing a little bit more about who Betsy is and what life was like before you met your husband and then how you actually met him?
Sure, I'd love to. So, what Betsy is like, I am, well, like you mentioned, I'm a mom to three. Grady's 22, Gavin's 19, and Sophie's 18. I'm soon to be an empty nester, so I'm kind of freaking out about that a little bit. I know it'll be great, but it's going to be a lot of change. So, that's on my mind quite frequently these days, but I'm excited for my kids as they move on with their lives. Um, Betsy, before I met Matthew, was living in Chicago. I moved there after college with some girlfriends and didn't have any money, but had a really cute apartment and got a job at Bloomingdale's and worked kind of in the store fixturing industry for several years. And that's where I met my late husband, Matthew. He was doing his residency at UIC in Chicago. And we met there and kind of had a whirlwind love story that was wonderful and exciting and fun and stressful too, because med students, well, he wasn't a student at the time, he was a resident, but that's a tough program to be in. But yeah, so that's kind of me. I've been selling real estate for the past almost 10 years, and I love what I do. I feel really blessed to be able to do it. I like to do rehab projects, and the painters just left about 15 minutes ago. So there's always something going on around here.
I love that though. I do. I absolutely love that. Well, I know that we're going to be getting into a lot of different topics. And one of the ones that I wanted to jump on right away, because you just said it about becoming an empty nester and having a little bit of anxiety maybe around that. Well, it's a changing identity, right? And
Yeah.
anytime we have a change in our identity, it's like starting over.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different too when you're a widow because I didn't think I would be doing it like by myself. And so, maybe 7 years ago, I thought that this period of time in my life would look very different, obviously, than it does now. Um, but yeah, I think, what's the flip side? That my kids are living in my basement for the rest of their lives? I mean, that's not a good thing, right?
It's like,
So
no, thank
I'm
you. No, thank
excited.
you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm excited about it too. So,
Yeah,
but
well, it's fun to see our kids grow up and spread their wings and fly. So it is, it's a very exciting time as well. And when we're talking about identity throughout our lives, we have the opportunity to add to our identity frequently. And so when you met Matthew and when you guys had this whirlwind, relationship and the start, how old were you when you guys got married?
we were 29, so a little
Yeah.
bit older, considering. But I felt, and I told my kids, I liked being that age when I got married. I had so much fun in my 20s too, and I was a little bit of a wild child, so it was good for me to, kind of get that out of my system. And when I met Matt, like I said, he was doing a really intense surgical rotation, and he really lived life to the fullest and loved every minute that he had away from the hospital. He loved it. He loved his job too, but it was very stressful. So we just, yeah, we had a blast. It was really fun. I feel like every stage of my life has been, I mean, I've had a lot of heartache along the way, but it's also been, it's been a great life. It's still a great life even after what I've been through recently. But
Yeah.
we all do that as we grow, we evolve, right?
We have to, right? Because if we're not evolving and growing, then we're basically dying, right?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
part of life. Expansion is part of life. Change is part of life. And sometimes we don't like those changes. Yeah, before we get into the really stressful aspect of your marriage, can you share what the best parts of your marriage were?
Oh, gee. Yeah, you know what? Matt was, look, he was funny. I don't think he didn't mean to be funny, but he just kind of was a character by nature. He was like uber passionate about super things, like silly things, like one, doing the lawn. That he was really passionate about that. But he loved the Pittsburgh Steelers. We loved to go mountain biking. We skied a lot together as a family. I found that to be a really fun family sport we all could do together. We loved, going out to new restaurants, and we had a ton of friends. Our house was kind of the hub of all the entertainment, and um, he was just a really compassionate guy. And when I first met him, I always would joke because he was 5'8", and I was always like, "You're a little short for me," because everybody I dated is really tall. But he just had this huge compassionate heart that drew me in, and he loved people, and he loved his patients, and he loved helping. So
Yeah, he
yeah,
sounds like he was an amazing, amazing guy.
he was. He was. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was very committed to his career as a doctor. How long was he in practice before he passed?
So he was in private practice for 16 years. But they go to, he had 14 years of schooling after high school just to become a doctor. And, it's very stressful. It's expensive. It's hard to get into. They're part of this very exclusive club. And then you get in the club and you gotta keep going. You gotta roll all the time. But he was in a great group up in Minneapolis, for 16 years.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. I'm glad that his patients had him for that long. Yet, you mentioned stress. I would love for you to be able to share deeper on what the stress was like, how it was really impacting him in his life, and really how the stress really impacts doctors, physicians as a whole.
Right. Yeah. So if you look back, like even just med school, it's so stressful. It's hard to get into. And then they become residents, and there's a complete and total lack of sleep. They are working all the time, expected to work all the time. Finally, get out of residency, and then you typically have a huge, medical school debt. We did. I write about it in the book. I think it was like 150,000, maybe $130,000. We're just starting out, and we're older. We're 32. All of our friends have been out working for, 10 years, and they all have houses and all of that. And here we are just scrambling, to make ends meet. But Matt was really fortunate and joined a private practice. But I don't even think when I was in the marriage that I realized how stressful it is. But I talk about all of the things that they went through, in my book a little bit. I elaborated a little bit more, but they have to do, constantly upkeep with the electronic medical records, and it's changing all the time. So he would talk about all the clicks he had to get through his day. And then, pressure from insurance companies and um, keeping up with all the latest and greatest medical journals. Whenever we went on vacation, Matt brought a stack of, medical journals. It was never like sitting down to read like a novel. And it just was so much all the time. Um, and I noticed, early on, of course, everybody knows somebody with cancer. So Matt was an oncologist. And so, he'd get home from a long day of work and then somebody called, my dad has cancer or my brother has cancer. And so like there was just never ever a break. And he was happy to help his friends, of course, and kind of lay things out in layman's terms for them. But it never ended. And I think what I talk about this moment a lot because um, it stopped me cold in my tracks. Matt and I, one of my parents' best friends, John, went to go see Matthew. He wasn't feeling well, and Matt diagnosed him with cancer. And he eventually did die. And we were driving to the funeral, and Matt said, "Do you think John's wife is mad at me?" And it kind of stopped me. I said, "Matthew, he had cancer. You can't save everybody, honey." But that always gets me choked up because he had such a big heart. And I think every patient death took a little piece of his heart. So ultimately, we need our doctors and we want our doctors to be compassionate. And Matt was pretty good about compartmentalizing, his work days. You have to be, because obviously we couldn't go to every funeral, but that was a close family friend. But I think all of those things add up over time. And then taking call, you're interrupted, you don't have sleep. So it's a really, really tough profession. It's
Yeah,
hard.
it
Yeah,
really is. I mean, they're giving, 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 giving. And I mean, it's true. I've spoken about this in previous podcasts about you cannot pour out of an empty cup.
exactly.
And doctors are constantly doing that. They're pouring and they're pouring, and yet they're not really being filled back up. So let's talk a little bit about depression. Let's talk about what you learned about it, first of all.
Yeah.
And I mean, because obviously this was part of your husband's experience.
Mhm.
Yet, what are signs of depression that maybe someone could be looking for in someone that they care about that may be going through something like this? But first, share with me what you learned about depression.
Yeah, I actually, Marcy, got a crash course in depression because I had never seen Matt depressed a day in his life. And I hardly ever saw him sad. I mean, he would come home from work some days and he would be down, but he was not a depressed person. So the everything that happened was shocking. But what happened was we moved from Minneapolis to Charlotte, and the job that he took was not what he expected, and he felt like a fool and that he had made a grave mistake. He kept saying this was career suicide over and over again. And I said, "Well, Matt, I mean, come on. Like, we don't need to be this dramatic. Let's just quit this job. We can go." We had kept our lake house up in northern Minnesota. I said, "We can go back." He had a non-compete in Minneapolis. He had a non-compete here, which I think is very, added to the stress. He felt trapped. So all of the sudden we were here, it was only about a week. And when he started saying all of these things, and Matt had always been just like, I'm gonna do whatever I put my mind to. He just put 110%. He always got what he wanted. So it was very strange for me to see him all of the sudden, go into this like, I feel like a fool, I made a mistake. And then he would come home and like lay on the couch. And that was bizarre because he would get home from work and go on a bike ride, or we'd go on a walk, or he'd grill dinner. I mean, he was like, "I can't even grill." And he loved to grill. We would joke about his meat products. He loved meat products. And at at times, you know, here I was, we just moved to a new town. I have 3 teenagers to raise. I don't know what the heck is happening. Um, but I was like, he is really sick. And I was saying the words depression, but it wasn't even like really clicking because it had never affected him before. But then he stopped sleeping, completely stopped sleeping. And I don't even know how he functioned every day because he got up and went to work every day because his patients always came first. So those are signs to look for if people are like eating more or less, sleeping a lot or not enough. And then doing things that are just out of character. Like for Matt, laying on the couch, I mean, that was just that he just didn't do that often. So, and then giving up the things he loved. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that those are very telltale signs, and yet we all get so busy. And oftentimes, just like what you said about Matt, is that, he was always so strong and always so happy. And so he was probably carrying this for a long time with a mask on, acting like everything was okay. And then it just wasn't. He just couldn't do it anymore.
And it's funny you say that, Marcy, because um, when you lose somebody to suicide, you instantly become an investigator, right? What did I miss? How did it? And so I think that yeah, he had to have been, stuffing these feelings down. And that's another thing, in med school, they are taught to show no weakness. They need to have all the answers all the time. They need to be right, and they're people. And that's just not realistic. Um, and so I think that Matt's identity was all tied into being a doctor. I mean, he knew he wanted to do that from the age of 3. So for him to come home and be so, discombobulated and not himself and just so torn up about it, I mean, he just crashed. I mean, and it was quick. I mean, because we were only here for 3 months, before he took his own life.
Wow. Okay. So now we're talking about identity again, too. I
Yeah.
mean, being so invested in who he was this doctor or this white coat or whatever it was that really defined who he was to himself, even though we know different, right? We know different that our true identity is in Christ. But I had similar experiences when I lost my career in law enforcement. I actually tried to take my own life a
Oh,
few
wow.
times. And so looking at what you just said about his identity and then what you said about him also saying it was career suicide, the decisions that he had made to move being career suicide. He could see himself losing his identity.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And
And
it's amazing, Marcy, how fast it happened. And that's the other thing, and I wrote the book partly because, I mean, there were 1,000 people at Matt's funeral and people couldn't believe it. And I have to tell you, there are days I wake up, we were 4.5 years here, actually, just a couple days ago, 4.5 years, and I can't believe it still. So I kind of wrote the book. I mean, there was no secret life, there was no marital problems, we didn't have financial problems. I mean, this happened like that. It was 3 months from what I saw. And now, like, he may have been, hiding things from me, but it was quick. It hit him hard, and he just didn't see a way out. And it's just so tragic and it's so sad.
it is. And I know from other people that I've known who have lost people to suicide, a lot of the time there's a lot of guilt with the people that are closest to them. Can you
Mhm.
share what that's been like for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Um, Well, it's shame and guilt.
Yeah.
So right away, that morning, Matt died at, I don't know, even 5, 6 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. And, I'm in shock. We were in shock. And, my pastors, 2 of my pastors from church came over, and I kind of couldn't believe it because I'm like, it's Thanksgiving morning and it's 6 in the morning. Like, what are they doing here? And all of the sudden, I got this feeling of shame washing over me. And I looked out my window and I thought, oh my gosh, my neighbors, what are my neighbors going to think of me? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And then it was like, what did I miss? What did I miss? And sadly, everybody that knew Matt was going through the same feelings. My children, my parents, my brothers, his parents, his brother. I mean, it just went on and on. All of his close friends. And so, it was a real that was something that I had to work really hard on in therapy to get through. I didn't cause his depression. It's like, with addicts. I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I couldn't cure it. Um, and so I really had to work really hard on letting that piece go. And listen, I believe that God has a greater plan. And um, Matt didn't commit suicide. Matt died by suicide. There's a big difference. I don't think he had any more control over his sickness than his cancer patients had over their cancer. It was the way he died. And so, I've had to really work hard on that piece, but that's tough with suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially being the spouse and the way the things in our mind work. And I'll even say the way the enemy uses the things in our mind to make us think, well, I wasn't good enough. I should have been better. If I was a better wife, or I should have done all those things.
Yep.
Yeah. That's not that, like you said, you couldn't control what was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so
Yeah.
hard, so hard. So I know that Matt is not the only physician that has taken his life. Um, what's the reality? What's the truth about physicians and suicide?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, about 10 days before Matt died, we were laying in bed and some guy from high school that I knew the last name friended me on Facebook. And so I accepted his friend request. He's an anesthesiologist in Minneapolis, and I graduated with high school with his sister. And I clicked on his post, and he was going to give a talk on physician suicide. And my heart dropped, and I looked at Matt. I said, Matt, oh my gosh, do doctors kill themselves a lot? Like, I had no idea. And he kind of just nodded. And so I thought, oh my gosh, he knows this. Like, this is like these doctors know this. So after Matthew died, and I felt very called to write the book. I was journaling throughout this whole process. Right when we moved here, it was like God wrapped his arms around me and said, "Write," because, like I said, I'm a real estate agent. I'm not a writer. So I was documenting everything. So I knew I had to write this book. So I started digging in and researching. Come to find out, we lose 400 doctors a year to suicide, a doctor a day. That's a whole med school class wiped out. And it is not a secret within the medical profession, but they don't like to talk about it. And so, here I am, I come out and kind of blow the lid off of everything. And that's why the book is titled what it is, because when I was growing up as a little girl, I mean, doctors, police officers, lawyers, I mean, those were pillars of our community, right? And so, I mean, if you had told me then that my husband would die by suicide, there was just no way I would have ever believed you, ever in a million years. And then come to find out that this is a real problem, a real problem. So that's why I support the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation. Dr. Lorna Breen is 49 years old as well. That's how old Matt was when he took his own life. Lorna was working in New York City during the pandemic and took her own life. And her brother-in-law, Corey, and her sister, Jennifer, started this foundation. And they are doing this wonderful work and, in DC to get laws changed, to stop asking invasive mental health questions on board exams and licensing exams and all of that. So we need change. Our health system is very broken. And I keep saying, if we don't have healthy doctors, who's going to take care of us? Right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I mean, that 400 a year, that's more than one a day.
Yeah.
That is a frightening number. And I know that, I mean, it's probably had an uptick over the pandemic
COVID.
and
Yeah.
recently, most definitely, because extra stress, there are extra pressures that were put on them. A lot of their own free agency taken away from them as a doctor. All of those things played into that.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. And not to mention in general, suicide has been on an uptake, right? Because of the extra pressures that people have been under, the struggles with financial situations, the inability to be with people when they pass themselves. All kinds of different things have played into a more a culture with more mental health concerns.
100%. The good news is we're talking about it. And
Yes.
that's what we need to do. We need to talk about it, you know?
Yes.
And it's not an easy subject to talk about.
It's not yet. A lot of the most important things to talk about aren't easy,
You're right. Mhm.
right? And that's why a lot of the times things don't get done around the most important things is because people don't want to have the conversation. And so,
Right.
again, I just want to thank you for being willing to come on and share your story. And we're not done with this yet. We're not done with this conversation because we haven't talked about what life was like for you after Matthew passed away. It's like,
Yeah.
what was it like having your identity stripped? I mean, because you were a doctor's wife, you were a wife, all of these different things that you were that were in correlation and in combination with your husband that were
Mhm.
all of a sudden severed in such a sad, sad way. So, what
Mhm.
was life like for you after Matthew passed? And what did you find that really was the most helpful for you?
Mhm. Well, I'll take the second question first, because that was easy. My faith carried me through all of it, and it still does to this day. I always said, I was a Christian. I've always been a Christian. Um, but until you have I mean, until I had something like this happen, I didn't have a personal relationship with Christ. And, I was Christmas, Easter, my kids went to church. I always had a faith, but this was different. This was like every day I need to start my day in prayer, talk to God, listen to my intuition. Um, and so my life completely, drastically changed. I mean, I talk about it in the book that, when Matt and I were married, I would get up. I always got up really early, went to the gym and, balanced the checkbook and super organized because his life at work was so busy that he would come home and, like to do things like mow the lawn or go for a bike ride. So I handled all of like the family, just everything with the household. So all of the sudden I was like, none of that stuff's really that important. I need to just start every day in prayer and turn my whole life over to God. So that's basically what I've done. So that's the number one thing that has helped me. But Matt, like I said, we had just gotten here. God put 7 women into my life that I met very quickly, and I found a church really fast. I was going to a Bible study. It was wonderful. Um, and then he died on Thanksgiving Day. So we've just been here for 3 months. And all of the sudden, I am a single mom. And I'm in a town where I don't know anybody. And I am just like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I met with my girlfriends. I had girlfriends flying from Minnesota. I was so fortunate. Just so many wonderful people. But my girlfriend's here. I said, I need a luncheon with my girlfriends here. I mean, they didn't know me. I mean, can you imagine? You're this woman who moves into town, and 3 months later, her husband shoots himself in the backyard. It was like, oh my gosh. So I had my girlfriend had a luncheon. I brought everybody, we all got together. I read Matt's obituary that I had just finished. I said, you guys, I was just like you, happily married for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20-year anniversary. And I said, and now I'm a single mom and I don't know what I'm going to need or do, but I know I need you. I know I'm going to need help. And they were amazing. So they just rallied around me. They were so fantastic. Still my best friends here. So, so that was super helpful. But then COVID hit. And so, then I'm like, oh my gosh, we need help. Like we needed therapy. We need a lot of grief counseling. And I mean, I was not as worried about me as I was for my kids. And so then I had to navigate that whole situation, which is kind of a blur. It was kind of nice, like we were all together, but it was really challenging because I knew we all needed help. So everything just exploded. And then slowly our group of friends, like our couple friends from Minnesota, like that kind of went away. So it's been a lot of change. A lot of
Yeah.
change.
There's a lot of transition when you have a loss like this, and when you are suddenly single
Mhm.
now, that widow, because a lot of the times, and this is coming from my husband and I actually facilitated grief share at our church for a few years. And
Nice.
so having some understanding around how relationships change and
Mhm.
how suddenly you're a sole female. And so couples are not as comfortable embracing you because now
Yeah.
there could be, even though there's not, the thought of a threat
Yeah.
introduced, right? And so those relationships all change. Plus, even though you all had a relationship with Matthew, everybody's relationship was so different, right?
100%. Yes, that's exactly true. And I always would say, "Oh, that won't happen to me. That's not gonna happen to me." But it did.
What would you say to someone that's saying that right now as they're listening, that had never happened to me? My husband would never do that.
Well, it can happen. It can happen, and I think, um, we don't wanna dwell on what could or could not be, but I always, after Matt died by suicide, I was, you question God, like, why? Why me? And then I thought, "Well, why not you, Betsy? I mean, why not you?" I've always had kind of this charmed life, and I've felt so blessed. And then I was like, well, everybody's due a trial. I don't get off the hook here. So you just kind of have to take it for what it is. And every situation is so different.
It really
I
is.
found that forgiveness for me is a gift that I give myself. I don't like to harbor resentment. It's like that saying, it's like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die. That's that's just not the way I choose to live my life.
Yeah. Well, and we're also commanded to forgive, right? Because
Yes.
that's one of the things that God did when he sent his son is he forgave all of our sins,
Yep.
right? And so
Yep.
if we aren't forgiving other people, especially because the things that they do against us are so little compared to the things that we've been forgiven for. So
Exactly.
so
One.
that's
Yes.
such a good way to live your life.
Mhm.
Um, I know that things shift also. It's like initially when you first lost him. And also I want to just talk about how good God is. Because I mean, seriously, in 3 months' time, you were introduced to a community of people at a new church that would be there by your side through all of this in such a short time period.
Amazing.
And think about it this way too, that if you guys had not moved from where you were
Yep.
to the new place, that this stress probably would have still caught up to him.
Yep. I've
And
thought
you
of that. Yeah.
and think about what happened with relationships with the couples that you were friends with.
Mhm. Yep. I know.
Because the support that you had has been so beautiful
Yeah.
in the new community with your new friends, with the ladies that just wrap themselves around you. I just think that God, he knows what's going to happen, but he does not cause things to happen.
Exactly. He gives us free will. But I believe it was like I kind of got guided here. I mean, and I'm here. I'm still in North Carolina. After COVID hit, we did move back to Minneapolis for 2 years. And so I've been back for about a year and a half. And I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And so yeah, it's been, I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything is guided by God. And so that's how I live my life. And I feel really fortunate.
Oh, that's beautiful. Leaning into him will make things more simple. It doesn't make anything easy, but it will make things more simple
Yes,
for sure.
definitely.
So, what is one thing that if you could go back and share with yourself when your husband was first becoming that doctor? I know he was in residency when you guys got married or when you came together in your relationship, but when he first became that doctor, What is something that you wish that you could go back and tell yourself?
Oh, I wish that, we're both such high achievers, like work, 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 work. That's just kind of how we've both been wired. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom, and that's a lot of work too. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's different work. Um, I just wish that we did take vacations, don't get me wrong, but like just really more, just decompressed and was more present in those moments of goodness and simplicity with little kids. That's the other thing. It's like, who cares if, the bed's not made? I'm like such a get up, make your bed, da, da, da. And it's like, in the scheme of things, it's okay. I just wish that I had maybe not been so type A and tightly wound and just taken it all in a little bit more and been more present. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice for all of us. That's good
Yeah.
advice for all of us is to
Yeah.
be more present, especially with these stinking things that are attached to us
Oh,
constantly, our cell phones and all that kind of
sure.
stuff. It's like put those things away when you're with the
Exactly.
people you love and care about and put the time in. Put that time in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what, from your perspective, could patients do to help doctors that are in these stressful situations to hopefully, mitigate some of the suicides that are occurring in the medical field?
Yeah. After Matt died, I went through his desk eventually and I found a file full of thank you cards. And they meant so much to him, and he saved every single one. And throughout talking all over the country now, what I do, and I have talked to physicians, and I'm like, what can patients do? Like, what can we just do for our doctors? And they're like, really, just ask us how we are. And I'll take it a step further and just say thank you. You know, Matt was known to talk a lot and he loved to teach his patients about what was actually happening in their body with the cancer. And so he would run late. And, we all are busy people, but you just never know if the doctor was just telling a patient that they have, 3 months to live. And I just think a little kindness and grace goes a long way. Everybody's doing the best job they can. Doctors get into the field of medicine to help people. They're certainly not making enough money. It's not like they're all rich doctors. They get in to help people, and that's why they're there. And I think the role has been diminished, and they do not feel appreciative. And I have to tell you, it's really sad because we're losing a lot of good doctors. And when we lose one to burnout or, um, God forbid, suicide, somebody just chooses to do easier work. It really creates a backlog in the system that is already kind of struggling. So just simplicity, like kindness, grace.
Yeah, just care. Just care a
Care.
little bit.
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the things, especially now post COVID, that was created during that time period was a separation of community, and
Mhm.
that we need to bring community back. And what community means is that we love and care about each other. We don't have to always agree.
Right.
We don't always have to get things our way,
Right.
but we need to have grace and care enough about someone else to hear what somebody else thinks.
100%. Yeah.
And so when it comes to that waiting time in the reception area, maybe have a conversation with somebody next to you,
Right.
right? Maybe you could take their mind off of a really stressful situation and it'll take your mind off of thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here waiting so long,
Right.
right? So just change our
Yeah,
perspective.
exactly. I agree. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So, what you are doing now, will you share more about that, as well as share with us a little bit about your book, The Illusion of the Perfect Profession?
Yeah, so the book was published about a year and a half ago. I self-published. I had no idea what I was doing writing a book. So I was lucky to have a great editor. And then she guided me to my publisher. And the book kind of took off. Matt and I obviously ran with a bunch of doctors. That was we had a big social circle of doctors. And one of our good friends is the medical director for a large orthopedic practice up in Minneapolis, like a huge group. And he called me right after the book was published in tears because one of their anesthesiologists had just died by suicide. And he said, this has got to stop. And so he bought 250 books of mine and gave them to every doctor in their practice. And the book has just kind of taken off. Um, it's just been word of mouth. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I've been asked to speak all over the country. And it's been such a blessing to me. It's really also hard emotionally. I just gave a talk up in Greensboro a couple of weeks ago, and afterwards, a wife of a physician approached me and said, that her husband had attempted suicide and that my story was her story. And she had gotten my book and couldn't put it down. And after she left, then the physician came up to me and they and basically told me everything that had happened in his life. And he said, there was nothing that was going to stop me. And he was highly credentialed, brilliant, brilliant person, went to Harvard, very, very smart. And my heart just broke when they left, that they had to go through that. Now, by the grace of God, he's still here and he's better. But I just am amazed at how many people out there are living the life that I lived. So I'm doing that on the side. And like you stated at the beginning, I am still an active real estate agent. And so the market's starting to soften here. So I'm working every day on that. And I do a lot of renovation projects for myself. And so that's fun. That's kind of what fills my cup because I like to stay busy and be involved. And that's kind of where my passion is. But I felt very, very led and called to write the book and to hopefully just help somebody else and let people know that they're not alone. And then on the flip side, I've been in a suicide support group and also in a women's Never Alone Widows group here at my church. And I like to show the ladies I'm here. This is 4.5 years later. I have a wonderful life. I've met a great man. We are just having a ball together. My kids love him. And so I'll never get over Matt Gall, but I will move forward. I have to move forward with my life. I think that's what he would want. I would want that for him if I died. And so, I keep saying one foot in front of the other and grief, how grief's like this. Some days are better than others, but we just take it for what it is and keep going.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things that your book is going to be doing and is doing is bringing awareness. And that's the first step to making change, right? To being able to come to a solution of a problem is we have to be aware that there is a problem in the first place. And you brought this awareness to me. I'm sure that my listeners did not know that it was such a big, big issue for doctors with depression and dying by suicide. And so awareness is that first thing, and it's so important. And to speak to your husband and him wanting you to move forward is that you will always have that special place in your heart that is just Matt Gall.
Yeah, he was unforgettable. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
that will always stay there. Yeah,
yeah. So you're moving forward, yet he still comes with you.
of course. Of
Yeah.
course.
Most
Yes.
definitely. I'm so happy, by the way. I had the biggest grin on my face when I heard that you've got a special guy because that is so important because there is life. You are not meant to just go on mourning for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
We're supposed to move from mourning into joy.
Exactly.
And
Morning
that's
dancing, and that's what we're doing. And
yes.
life is beautiful. And I tell my kids, and I know it's cliche, but you it's how you react to different situations. And listen, if you have a faith and you have God to lean on, it is everything because you can get through anything. And he does tell us to be grateful in all circumstances. And that is very difficult to do, but you can always find something to be grateful for.
Amen. Amen. That is so good. So, first of all, I want the tribe to know that your book, The Illusion of the Perfect Profession, they can go and grab it off of marcynettles.com/books. It is up there. Go grab it because I know you're going to want it. And as a matter of fact, we're going to make sure that you want it because the special gift that is being offered by Betsy is the first chapter of her book. So if you also go to marcynettles.com/freebies and ask for the freebie from this episode, then we will make sure that you get that first chapter as well as the link to where you can purchase the full book because we know that once you get hooked on that first chapter, you're going to want to purchase the book. So again, that's marcynettles.com/freebies. Now, Betsy, we're just about done here today. I would just love first of all, where can the tribe get connected to you and follow you? You mentioned Facebook and Instagram. Where else are you available?
You know what? Really, if you just Google me, you'll find me there. My email is betsygall1@gmail.com. And if you just look for me on Instagram or Facebook, I like to post. It's just it's me posting. It's my real life. Post little tidbits about what I'm up to, what my kids are doing, projects I'm working on, and then just special things about the book and things that happen in my life. So. Um, I hope that I can provide hope to people and widows out there that your life is not over. You will get through it. It's not easy. Um, but I really urge people just to lean into their faith. I really do.
Amen. I love that. And I was going to ask you if you had any final words, but that really, really kind of summed it up beautifully. So
Oh,
thank you so, so very much, Betsy, for being such a beautiful guest here today and for sharing your personal story. The episode that we decided to title, You're a Widow After Your Physician Husband Dies by Suicide. What Now? I truly believe is going to be very beneficial and helpful to many people that are going through difficult times or may go through them or may be able to avoid them by identifying someone they care about that may be suffering from depression. So thank you so much for being here today.
well, thank you for having me, Marcy. You're just a beautiful person. I can tell you just have a wonderful soul. And thank you for the platform. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.